However, Sennacherib withdraws. And then the people, of course, go wild from fear to great rejoicing. In that way the Lord God of hosts called to weeping and mourning, to share your heads and put on sackcloth. But perhaps they should have been doing that, as the verse says, rather than just rejoicing, because they hadn't been listening to the prophet Isaiah. Instead, it goes on, there was joy and festivity, killing oxen and slaughtering sheep, eating meat and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. You had no thought for the Master, no thought for him who showed everything long ago. When Sennacherib withdrew, they went wild with rejoicing, instead of thanking God for removing the great tyrant. Isaiah is obviously unhappy with the festive mood after the siege has been lifted, partly because Judea lost so much of the surrounding countryside, now part of Assyria, but mostly because, in their fear, the people turned to their own resources instead of relying on God. And they seem to have as the way they think, their motto for life, let's eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Just interestingly too, in Ecclesiastes 8:15, we have the lovely phrase, which is reminiscent of that, eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And now the fourth and the final oracle in this first section, the oracles, it's an oracle against Shebna and Eliakim, chapter 22, verses 15 to 25. These guys are palace officials, and they were the ones who negotiated with Sennacherib on the king's behalf, on Hezekiah's behalf. Isaiah probably personally confronted Shebna for misusing his office and preparing for himself a massive, glorious tombstone, and for gaining money through extortion. He's going to be exiled to Assyria. Eliakim is called father of Jerusalem and is invested with the key of the house of David, a phrase which the early Christians saw as, well, as talking about the Messiah, Jesus. In Revelation chapter 3 verse 7 we read, here is the message for the holy and faithful one who has the key of David. And in Matthew 16 verse 19, Jesus confides to Peter the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be considered bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be considered loosed in heaven. Now, a later editor within this passage accuses Eliakim of nepotism, that is, of favouring members of his own family, and therefore he comes to a sticky end. So that's an oracle against those two palace officials. Sadly, we don't have time to look at the last oracle about the city of Tyre, or as we might say today, Phoenicia. So that's the first section. Now the second section is just looking at what do we mean by apocalypse, and can these next chapters, 24 to 27 of Isaiah, rightly be deemed the Isaiah apocalypse? So just two sections here. What does the word apocalypse mean? Literally, it means, it's a Greek word, revelation. The term apocalypse has both a theological worldview, and it's also a word that describes a type of literature. In the Collegeville Pastoral Dictionary of Biblical Theology, Zachary Hayes says this: as a worldview, Apocalypse is a form of eschatology. That is, it's a form of looking at how the world's going to end. Eschatology. Pardon me. Which has evolved from both Old Testament prophecy and from the books of the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. And it's found especially helpful, meaningful in times of great civic national crisis, or in times when things are going backwards, diminishment. So that's what it is as a worldview. As a type of literature, it takes the form of a secret revelation given mainly by a heavenly messenger, an angel, to a privileged earthly recipients. Visions, future predictions, and overviews of history and journeys through the heavens are often included in this type of literature. Now just a bit further, the worldview has three characteristics. One, the first, the world is pictured as moving towards the climax, a cosmic struggle which will be difficult for all of us. It's not going to be a great thing, a nice thing at all. The second thing is that this cosmic struggle that's going to happen is between the forces of evil on the one hand and the forces of good on the other. And human beings are going to find themselves in one or other of those camps. Then the third characteristic is that this time of trial and struggle and suffering, especially for the good, will end up by being followed by a time of joy and of restoration. Now we are familiar with all this as we read the New Testament. Just think of the Last Judgment scene in St. Matthew's Gospel, where we have that extraordinary scene where everybody assembles on the last day, and the sheep are on the one hand and the goats are on the other. There was also much apocalyptic thinking in the church's struggle in the last couple of hundred years. Because we were struggling, we thought, the forces of Satan, especially in those forces which were against the church, including communism, and then the forces of good, of course, of which the church is at the vanguard. And we've seen that Mary appears to visionaries with a call to penance, to save us from the coming trial, the coming struggle. And all this reminded Catholics who felt so much on the defensive that God is going to come and save us. God's still in charge of history, and prayer is still the most important thing we do. And in the struggle that comes, God will save the good, save the just. So apocalyptic is a way of, it's a worldview, a way of looking at life, and it's back in those times in the scriptures, but it's also been part of our history too, and we should understand that. And it's very helpful for us in a time when we're struggling, we're on the defensive. Now the question is the Isaiah Apocalypse, chapters 24 to 27, correctly called apocalyptic or not? Now, all the commentaries I've been able to have a look at say that the chapters 24 to 27 don't contain a fully developed apocalyptic, say that we'd find in the book of Daniel or the book of the Apocalypse itself in the New Testament. But we can certainly see in these chapters the seeds of what would later develop into full-blown apocalyptic. Because we have here, in these chapters, a deep concern about the end time.